Welcome to Camp Confidential, Beyond the Bars. I'm Katrina McLaren, and with my co-host Cheryl Womack, author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, we tell it like it is. In Season 1, we take you inside the walls of a women's federal prison camp. From pre-sentencing to navigating daily life behind bars, we offer practical advice, survival strategies and insights that no one tells you before you go in. No sugarcoating, no cliches. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and consult a professional. Welcome to today's episode, You've Got Mail, and it's based off the book How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison by Cheryl Womack, available now on Amazon. Now, Cheryl, we've discussed how important the lines of communication are in prison. Can you walk us through your first experience in sending and receiving mail?
Well, Katrina, mail is such an important thing. There's no way to describe it. And I think I've pointed out a couple things before. The longer you're in, the less you get, which is unsettling to you as you watch it begin to diminish. And I think the nicest thing you can do for yourself is, as we suggested before you go in, send yourself some mail for the first day of your arrival. Confirm that it's there. Make sure you've got some crossword puzzles and some soft cover books that you want to read, or little things like astrology book. I don't care what it is, but send yourself some things that are acceptable and approved in the system for you to get. So you got mail the first day.
Take us through that process of how you get your mail. What happens each day for mail?
So Monday through Friday, except for on holidays, have your 4 o'clock count. And then right after the count is clear, you go eat one dorm and then the other dorm. And as soon as the first dorm is done, they go to the visitor's room where they'll get their mail. And you basically all sit around, and the guard comes in with a huge bin of mail, and they pull them out one by one and read your name. And if they're all together and somebody's organized them, you could get a big package of them. If they're not, you could go up and get 10 letters if you've got 10 different pieces of mail. It's also where you're going to get correspondence. If you're waiting for something to come back from your counselor telling you you've got approved guests, that's going to come through the mail and be delivered to you at the same time in that room. So you basically all sit around, and as your name gets called, you go up. And I can't imagine how it feels to be there and be there any length of time and never go up. And the other thing I think that's hard about that, it's hard. And on the other hand, I see the sense of it. If they're going to communicate with you through your counselor or your case manager by giving internal mail, then I could see why you need to go up for mail, and you're required to go to mail call. You're required to be present.
So every inmate has to be present for that?
Every single inmate has to be there. And that again, can be very hard when you never get mail.
I think that would be a little soul-destroying, actually, and a constant reminder that perhaps, if you were already feeling forgotten, you're certainly that's another way to make you feel even more forgotten.
I mean, you can see the girls that never get mail where suddenly they're just stunned. They're stunned and shocked and thrilled that they got a piece of mail. And I don't blame them. Again, I was very fortunate that I had a lot of mail. And had I not been so good about sharing my mail all the time, I mean, from the smut magazines that you can get on the grocery store lines to come out to whatever books I got, I would just share. As soon as I had them through and gone through the girls in my bus stop, then we'd shoot them out to the general dorms. And that made people excited for me to get things. And there were probably 5 or 6 women that wanted to be on the list to get the Wall Street Journal. So once I finished with it in my class, then I would shoot that out, and it would go literally through a list of people to read that.
So mail was important to you, and it was important to receive. For other inmates, you obviously witnessed that as well?
Mail is the most important thing you can receive because it's free. I don't know that women are great at corresponding out. I know also a lot of women get prison pen pals. So they'll have, a pen pal from a male prison. And I think there are things that you can get online on our TrueLink system, or they have them on the bulletin boards where they have places that you can get on an email to find yourself a prison pen pal where you can communicate back and forth. But it's just another way or source of sharing lives, getting some information, sharing and getting photos to stay current, family photos, whatever you can get, so that you are in some kind of communication, not just with your family, but with the outside world.
So if you were going to receive correspondence legally from your solicitor or anything like that, is that how it's going to come, through that general mail call?
It will come that way unless your attorney understands that if they mark it properly, that it's attorney-client privilege confidential on the top where they box it off, and there's a way that they typically know how to send it and send it sealed. then they'll actually call you up in the middle of the morning for you to come get your legal mail. Or if it comes in the middle of the day, they might bring you. I had a couple of those that came up where I got things from the attorney and I got called up to come and get those separately, and they don't open them. They don't look at them. It's the only thing they don't open and they don't look at.
So was it quite common for your mail to have been opened by a guard and
All of
inspected?
it. All of it. They open and read everything. Some things that you'll not get are if your letters are filthy and extremely inappropriate, you might not get them for that reason. You might not get them because if they worry about if you have running ink or something like that, they might be worried that you've got something in the ink and you might not get it for that reason. They're very selective, but usually the mail comes through. I mean, a lot of the mail that comes through is not personal letters. It's postcards. It's cards, but there are people who write letters and get them. I didn't get very many letters, but I got them. But like I even remember a friend of mine sending me letters, and they were working on a project with Daytona Speedway and some new construction development stuff, and even put magazine articles from the newspaper in and folded it in. And those all came through to me. It was great to get that kind of information that was almost businessy, but not quite businessy, but also, a friend who's paying that much attention to give you those kind of details about the outside world. That was great correspondence. Most women don't get things like that.
So did you ever have any mail that was rejected or that you had an issue with that you couldn't take delivery of?
Well, yes. So again, if it had stickers or if it had glitter or confetti or anything like that, if you get a book that comes in and somebody mails you a hard-covered book, you can't get a hard-covered book in the mail. It has to come directly from Amazon and has to be in Amazon packaging, or you don't get that. I would order these binder planners that the girls loved. And after I'd ordered about 4 of them to give as gifts to girls, that loved them and had been in a long time and were just to have a planner in their life. And they were pretty nice panda planners. And so I would order them and bring them in and give them to them for their birthdays. And after I did about 4 of them, I pretty much got told I couldn't bring them in anymore, period. And I said, where's the rule that says that? And he goes, I said so. It's the rule. You can't have these anymore. And literally took the ones I had and sent them back.
How are you able to order that? Are you able to get on the internet and order through Amazon? How do you arrange that?
Oh, no, I send emails to my husband and he handles all that.
Because otherwise people might think you can just get online and order books, and you can't do that, right?
Then that's why I think often people would come to me and ask me, can you try to find me this? Can you get me that? What do you know about this? Because they knew I had a constant contact with an email to either get information, try to get something sent in. That's reasonable, just something that they couldn't get because they didn't have someone to email and ask for it.
From your point of view, how did it make you feel to receive mail while you were incarcerated?
It's hard to describe because you just can't quite put your finger on how important mail is to you. Again, it's a way that you feel remembered Monday through Friday. You're just so pleasantly surprised with every email or every piece of mail that you get, because it comes from different people you didn't expect it to come from. For me, again, to get them from people and they'd send extra cards because my husband told them I was sharing cards with people, or to get just a personal letter from somebody that I hadn't really talked to very much before I'd come in, but they'd taken the time to write me a letter and let me know they were thinking about me. Or another person, sent me a thing where they went to church and paid for masses and rosaries to be said while I was in for me. It touches your heart how thoughtful people are. It really touches your heart. And it's different to know people are thinking about you on the outside world, and they are. It's totally different when they can reach in and touch you with a piece of mail.
To show that someone's taken the time to do that for you.
It just gives you something in your hands to remind you have a connection outside of this place. There is a life to go back to when you're done here. Because when you come in, especially when you first get there, it seems forever. 18 months that is going to be reduced down, but they won't tell you exactly how much it'll be reduced down. You can guess, but maybe not. You might get shot. So it's all so unsettling and so unknown from exactness. And, being a business person, you schedule and have things very exact in your life, and suddenly there is no exact. So you have to just abandon that and be happy with what you're getting. And so again, to get letters and information that came in different ways and different formats, or people would send me a magazine, or they, like I said, send me a paperback book. It was amazing how thoughtful they were. And it's amazing how much it meant to me. It's sort of like when people die, the services are for the living, for them to show up and say, I loved your parents, or I loved your sister, whomever. Well, that's sort of how mail is. You remember who didn't send you an email and thought would. You remember that. And you have to get over that. But because there are so many women who get no mail at all. So you have to be appreciative. I was extremely appreciative for what I got, but I would have to pull myself off of the drama chain of, you can't get upset somebody's not sending you mail. I don't know what their circumstances are. I don't know how hard it is for them. Maybe they don't know what to say to me. I mean, talking to somebody about going to prison is like talking to somebody about when they've been diagnosed with cancer. They don't know what to say to you. They don't know how to respond to it. You don't know what to say to them. And even when you talk to them, you don't know what kind of emotional state you're going to stay in. So like, it's extremely difficult to have those conversations, but they're so necessary.
When you're receiving cards and I know that you put a request in for your husband to send you some index cards so you could help with teaching. There were some rules around the cards, right? That they had to be written in. You just couldn't get sent blank cards.
Right. Anything you received had to have, it could be in pencil so you could erase it. But anything you got, especially gift cards or things like that, because I think they just assumed you were going to sell it, make it a secondhand market. You just wouldn't really be able to sell secondhand cards because there were so many amazing handcrafted cards available to get there that if the guards paid attention at all, they'd see that a store-bought card is no competition whatsoever. They're unique and great cards for you to have, and you just can't believe how amazing cards can be, and you can't believe how expensive they are. And when I've sent cards into girls after I've gotten out, it's another reason you don't get many cards. Cards are expensive, $6, $8, $10, and then postage. They're cool. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. They have cards like I just didn't know they had. And people found the most unique ones. They'd be 3-dimensional. And I mean, it'd be a life-changing evening to have a card to go around and share and talk to everybody about going, look what this one does. It's just very fun. But at the same time, it's hard to stop and think people can't afford it. They can't afford to do very much.
And that's an interesting point. So if you wanted to write someone a letter to the outside while you're in prison, I'm assuming you have to buy paper, the pen or pencil through a commissary, and then the postage stamp. Is that right?
Yes. If you're an indigent, we can give you this little yellow 5x7 pads. So you could write it on that. But otherwise, you have to buy notebook paper on the commissary. And let me tell you, when you're picking whether I'm going to have bar soap or whether I'm going to have shampoo or vitamins that I need or something like that, paper is going to be way down the line. You can get copy paper if you've got a copy card. You can copy something and get some of the paper that way. But it's difficult to have things to write on. It's difficult to have an ink pen. I mean, most of everything in there is a pencil. Pencils everywhere. So that's another thing we give out through Big Sisters. When we're giving them out for the indigent, we give out 2 number 2 pencils when we give out the little pad of paper that we get. It's extremely limited, but that's why you get it, so that you can communicate with somebody in the outside world. And girls found a way to write letters, but mostly I think that's why email is important. Email is extremely important because it is very hard to communicate in writing and it's expensive. So you've got to figure out how to have the paper, get a pencil, how to have a pen. Postage is expensive. It's got a 30% markup on it like everything else. And it costs a lot to put things in the mail.
And you actually did mention, sort of touched on it a little bit before, that from the outside world, people can come up with some very creative ways to get drugs into prison. And I think one of those was I think you alluded it to in the book anyway, was fentanyl in the ink that was coming in on written material, which I'd never heard of.
Right, either in ink or dropped on the paper itself. And, so I heard a lot about it at the men's. And then without saying too much, I also heard about it because I had some mutual people that I knew inside who were eating pieces of a postcard that they got. So you hear the prison go, we're only going to allow postcards. But I knew girls who were eating the postcard so that they could benefit from the drugs that were laced on them. Now, the problem over on the men's side, I don't know why it never happened at the women's side so bad. But the problem of the men's side is they just consumed so much or got so much more than anybody else that, again, they'd have to lock the whole place down because those people were having out-of-body experiences and they were figuring out how to just manage and contain them so that the whole place wouldn't be disrupted. And so they'd have to be locked down.
That raises a lot of concerns too, I think, around safety. I don't know what the prison testing situation's like or what they have to do, but it seems like people are just coming up with more creative ways to find other ways to bring things in, which maybe penalizes the people that are following the rules. When you had an issue with mail, received something that would be perceived as contraband, what actually happened and how were you told that?
I'm not going to say that every person who handles incoming mail or outgoing mail is like that, but we had a CO who was going into retirement, and he was a big burly guy. I mean, he seemed nice enough, but he loved to come in at 5:30. He loved to argue and yell at people. He liked to try to make people afraid. He didn't make me afraid. He made me mad. And, and so we would argue. He'd bring me up at 5:30. And the first thing he'd say is, do I have to call every person you know to tell them what contraband is? I didn't know what contraband was. There's not stuff that clearly told me what contraband was. So I said, I guess you do. I said, but first you might start by telling me, do you have a list? As he shouted it all up, he goes, well, Mick, what do I? So he hands it out like he's going to give it to you. But if you reach for it, he'd pull it back. You'd put it out, he'd reach for it and pull it back. Then he'd take it and he'd throw it in the trash. He goes, you can't have this. It was just, you're like, why are you getting me up? Just send me a note and tell me you threw my mail away.
How is he getting hold of you at 5:30 in the morning?
Over the PA system, where the entire camp gets to hear me being called for bad mail.
Oh, my goodness.
Often. And of course, it happened the most in the winter when it's freezing cold. You have to get fully dressed in your greens like you're going to work. So you can't go up in sweats and stuff and throw something on quickly. No, you have to get all the way dressed and go up there, and check in with him. And then, you have to stand in the other room till they tell you he's ready for you, even though he just called you. And even if you tried to get there really fast because you had to get fully dressed, you also got yelled at sometimes just because you didn't get there fast enough. I mean, you just couldn't win sometimes with this. And you knew you were going to get lip. You just knew you were going to get yelled at.
And I'm sure that made you popular with the other inmates when your name's been called out at 5:30 in the morning on a PA system that's waking everyone up, not just you.
Yes, because that's about the time, they're calling to have them come into the cafeteria to start preparing food and things like that. But there aren't many calls that have to happen that morning. So they surely didn't need you to be announced to come up and have yours done. And I surely didn't need mine because, again, you don't know what they're calling you up for. And so it's unsettling.
Give me an example of what they cited for you as being contraband mail. What was in your mail that was deemed to be contraband?
Well, I had a couple who had young kids, grade school, and they literally for Easter put stickers on the pages that they sent to me. You can't have stickers. Or another girl put a little bit of confetti in so that, she knew that I like to send cards and confetti and it'd fall everywhere and that I'd love that. So she sent it like that. Well, that's a no-no. You can't have that. Then I had people who would send me cards and not sign them because they knew I was giving them out to other people. So they just thought, well, we'll send her some cards and she can sign them. I got called up for all those because you can't have things that aren't signed. I got called up and yelled at for the pandas, even though there was nothing that said I couldn't get those panda things and they were soft cover and it should have been everything by the rules. This guard just decided you can't have them. So I would get called up every time one came in, was just belittled about it. And then after about 4 of them, it was just no more. You can't have them. Don't send them because you're not going to get them.
And this instance, anyway, was no doubt that was using this as a bit of a power play because it is an emotional control thing that to dangle literally in your face your mail that you know come from someone, but you don't know who because you can't get hold of the mail, and then for them to throw it in the bin. I understand if that you're breaching some type of rule, but it sounds like it could be handled a little bit more humanely.
They probably think like most people in the world who are in prison, what do we care? But you didn't give up your right to humanity when you go to prison. You just gave up your right to the outside world and on a limited basis where you still have access to very limited things. And so there's no reason not to be professional about it, but he just was not.
No, and I completely understand that people have that perception where you're in jail and therefore you should suffer. But I think you going to jail is the suffering. But more importantly, there's all this talk about rehabilitation. So it doesn't encourage rehabilitation if you're not being treated with the same human decency that you would expect on the outside as you would get on the inside. I'm curious to know, obviously we're talking about hard-covered mail and books that you're going to receive through the post. Of course, there's so many other lines of communication and ways to receive mail and communication while you're in there. Let's talk a little bit about email and video chats. Talk us through that process and what system that was through.
Well, once you've set up your Core Links system, then you can load some money on that. And I cannot remember the cost of it, so I'm not going to guess, and chances are it's changed. But it costs you money to not to read your emails, but to type them and send them. So when responses came back, I don't know if you were charged to open it new, but if you went in and reread your emails and kept your emails, there wasn't a charge for that. But I probably so much per word or so much per line, or I think it had to do with how much time you were on typing the email. And then, of course, when you got on to do emails, every terminal was set up so that after 15 minutes, it timed off and it died. So you had to be aware of and pay attention to how long you'd been on, or you could be in the middle of something and it dies. You didn't send it and it doesn't save it. It's just gone. So that was a great way to communicate. It was a much less expensive way to communicate more steadily. Again, if you're doing pen pals in prison to find them, that's a good source and a way to do it. There are girls who figured out how to look at Facebook. I don't know how, but some of these things, and I never saw it. I never saw anybody do it, but they'd go, well, did you see so-and-so on Facebook? And I'm like, what? How did you get on Facebook? But they would, figure out how to do things. But that is a great source for you to be able to do it and keep in touch. The other thing is they would have things like legislation and current laws or current rules in the prisons. And so by getting on this CoreLink system, you also go keep up with things that were going on, what acts were pending, when they might pass. Again, an act can be pending, an act can pass, and it still may not be implemented for some time at your prison. So knowing that it passed doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. For example, they passed the Next Step Act while I was in there that said if you're over 60 and you had a safe place to go home to, then you could bypass the halfway house. And I was 68 and I did not get to pass the halfway house, and I certainly had a safe place to come home to. You have to pay attention. Regulations are regulations, but that doesn't mean they're immediately implemented where you are.
So it pays, and I'm sure there must be many inmates that think they're prisoner attorneys. So I'm sure. So there are people that are monitoring that as far as inmates are concerned to keep everyone else up to date as well, because otherwise how else would you know? It's not like you're receiving a daily newspaper.
I think, sadly, one of the hardest things to me about prisons are that most of the information comes from other inmates. And so you're getting everybody, it's like if you go into a job and you learn your job and then you train the person, but maybe you put a little twist on how you do things, and the next person puts a twist on it. And pretty soon their job they're doing may not look anything like what the job started out to be. Well, that's sort of how it is, in this kind of a situation, that you're getting information from somebody which may not remotely be like it is anymore because it's had so many different changes. It's rumors, so there could be something that's factual. There could be most of it that's not factual. But because you don't have other sources, they're not having meetings. Like they had a meeting, once about going to halfway houses that you attended 90 days before to have a meeting. It's the only meeting there were two meetings, one where we all got in trouble with the new warden, and then this one where we did the halfway houses. And mostly what they told us in the halfway houses were that they were shutting them down. So good luck if we got in one, and that was, a lot of, and I was listening because I thought eventually maybe I could do a 3/4 way house. And what's that mean? And what's that look like? And so I had lots of good questions, and they were over me asking questions because they just didn't understand why I cared. And I thought, I got a reason I care, but they couldn't be bothered with it. Again, I think the level of competency of people in prison and what they might and might not be able to do when they get out. But again, you get so used to being dismissed or treated like you're stupid, whether it's something coming through an email. You can get an email from the warden, or somebody who's reviewed something that you sent in that comes in on your CoreLinks and just dismisses you and tells you you're wrong, and that's it. It's their decision. So the internal information can be very frustrating. Nonetheless, it's still better to be able to have an internal source to use, because if you had to get in front of these people, you've got, 150 different women trying to get in, and 175 women trying to get in to see one counselor. It's impossible to do.
And let's be clear, when you're going to email someone, you're not just typing in a random email address. These people have to be already approved. Is that right? And on your list?
Right. Not only do they have to be on your list, remember when you send them an email, they have to go in and accept it so that it gets into the system. Because if they send an email and they don't go in and accept in your link in the email, you won't exchange emails. You have to send them an email. They have to respond in that email, clicking on the link so that it connects the two of you, and then you'll have those exchanges. But right, they absolutely have to be on your list and be pre-approved.
I think it's important for people to understand that as an inmate, you don't actually have access to the internet. You have access to up to 100 people that are approved that you can potentially email, correspond with, as long as they're approved. You can also do a video chat. Talk us through a little bit about that, because I know you mentioned that you were able to video chat with your sons and your husband.
Let's back up a minute for the emails that you can get. Now, I don't understand how this works. So it must be that if you're doing pen pals with prisoners, you're only doing correspondence and not on an email, because if you're married to a felon who's out on paper, you can't be in contact. They're not going to approve him. They're definitely not going to approve them forever to be a visitor while they're on paper. So you have some limits through that. And so there are people who you can't communicate with, even if you get them on your list. And that's why you put them on a list, because they have to approve them.
So if you're on parole, and as you just said, you've got a spouse or something that's out of prison on parole, you theoretically can't communicate with that spouse and they can't come and be a visitor while they're on parole. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Think about when I got out and I spent 1 year on paper. Through that whole time, I couldn't communicate with those girls that I knew who were still in prison and send them emails because I was on paper. They'd get in trouble. I'd get in trouble. I'd be breaching my parole. They're not supposed to communicate. I mean, you're not supposed to communicate with a felon while you're on paper and while you're in prison. So those are limits that I think you need to remember. And again, for a lot of people, if their sisters, brothers, mothers are also have had some problems with drugs, there's a lot of people that you're restricted to, which is another reason why communication could be very limited when you're in jail.
Especially if you're in a circle and that's all you've ever known your entire life. That's going to be extremely limiting and very isolating and lonely, I would have thought.
I mean, think about how hard that is. I mean, it's hard enough to have anybody just want to try to keep regular communication with you. And you know people that are near and dear to your heart, you really want to have communication with. And then maybe you can't. That's just another. Now, you can write letters to each other. So you can write from one prison to another prison. You can do that. But that pretty much becomes your source of communication.
So we know that you were located some 5 hours away from your home where you did time in the prison camp. So I would have thought video chats would have been quite important for you to be able to communicate back with your family. Talk us through that process.
It took me a while to catch on to video chats, and I wished I'd have caught on. I mean, it probably took me 90 days to figure out how to use it. What does it mean? You know, it's like being on Facebook on a terminal. And so first you have to go get on TrueLinks, and you have to use some of your money to schedule the time. And you have 25 minutes to be on this video chat where you can. So you get in and you punch your number in and your prison code and everything in like you're making a cell phone call, but eventually the person's face will come up or it won't, and you can just hear their voice. It doesn't always work. So sometimes it's not a great connection. You don't get your money back. Most of the time it works, but sometimes it does not work. And then in a video chat, you know, they don't put you in a private area. They put two of these terminals side by side, and then they have it in the prison laundry room and a room with some card tables where people sit in there and play cards all the time. Well, they're supposed to leave when you come in for a video chat, but nobody does. And so the other thing that happens is you're not ever supposed to let anybody get on your screen with you and share a conversation, because that could get you a shot or that could get you just losing phone privileges. And so some of the situations of how they set things up leave you in a very difficult situation.
So the video chats themselves are monitored as well. They are monitored by the prison?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I saw girls get shots because, you know, they'd flash their boobs to their boyfriend or husband or whatever while on the video chat. And it didn't take long before they got called in and written up. You cannot do it.
And I know you've mentioned to me in the past as well that being a town driver, you would have to book your video chats in advance. But being a town driver, you could be called up at any moment. Now, that's got to be a little soul-destroying if you've got a scheduled chat booked with one of your children and you just don't show up and have... Is there any way for you to communicate to them what's happened?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the TrueLinks has sent them a link telling them here's where your call is. Now, imagine if you're that child, adult child or regular child, anyone sitting at the other end, and I'm out on a town drive and I haven't gotten back, or something's happened and we can't get on the phone. The place has gone into lockdown and you can't use phones or what have you. That person just sits there for as long as they're willing to sit there, up to 25 minutes waiting for you to pick up. It's horrible. I had it happen once where I set up a video chat, and I cannot remember what I tell myself to this day is they didn't realize what time it was because it was early when I was doing it, and they never got on. I mean, you just come away bawling. It's a very sad situation.
Yeah, I would have thought that can be a little soul-destroying.
Yes.
So we've got video chats, we've got postal mail. The other way of communication, of course, which I think would probably have quite a lot of high demand, is phone calls. How does that work as far as you accessing the system and your voice and everything like that?
Well, remember, I think we've talked about it earlier, but when you're setting up, one of the most difficult things that happens is you get set up on phones as soon as you get set up on the system. So it's fairly quickly, within a couple days. Unless you're a regular person going in and out of prison, you're distraught. And so your voice is not normal. And you have to get on and you have to put all the keypad number in like you're making the call. And then it asks you to state your name, and you have to say your name. The point is that every time you make that phone call, you have to say your name in exactly that tone for it to recognize you every single time you make a phone call. So that's hard enough. It's because you might be mad, you might be excited, you might be coming with good news. You might be sleepy. Anything. You might have a cold. I mean, one time I couldn't call my son to tell him happy birthday because I was really sick and I had a hoarse voice and it would not recognize my voice. And I felt miserable anyway coming out to make the call. But I went to bed crying because I couldn't even tell my son happy birthday on his birthday. The systems are there, but they can be difficult to work with. They're not the best systems. I would fix that where, somehow, some way it would be more lenient for recognizing the voice. You know why they do it. They do it so that women can't have another woman do their phone time. But then the women just sit there and they say, okay, I'm out of minutes. I'm going to buy you something on commissary or something I can't do anymore. So I'll buy you something on commissary, and somebody else makes the phone call and then they transfer the phone over to the other person. It still happens. They're not fixing anything. They're not preventing women from using somebody else's time who doesn't have anybody to call by that monotone phone thing you're supposed to be using. It doesn't fix that problem. So they need to do better.
How did the limited communication affect your relationships with your family and your spouse?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't even imagine. I mean, you're sad. They're sad. You're sad. You just can't be in touch from being able to reach out, talk to somebody whenever you wanted. I mean, I lived with my youngest son. I talked to my oldest son all the time. My husband and I do things together all the time. And suddenly 10 minutes a day. So, and a video chat for 25 minutes once a week with my boys.
It's heartbreaking and it's soul destroying because jail and the camp, it punishes in so many other ways that you probably don't expect is coming.
I mean, look at how it feels over 5 years later. It's still very hurtful to know that we just had to be cut off from each other. And I don't understand that. I don't understand why that matters.
Do you think it made the relationship stronger when you came out of prison and when you're actually back home in your environment again? Do you think that helped the situation, helped them to understand you better?
No, I don't. I think it was a hard situation. It's like cancer. It's hard to talk about. I don't think they'll ever understand it. I don't know if I'll adequately ever be able to explain it to them. No, it doesn't help, but it does help just to be able to tell them you love them and you miss them. That matters.
So what advice would you give to other families on the outside with regards to communicating with their loved ones that are still going through this process?
Just use whatever means you've got possible. For example, if you can get note cards or buy cards from the other women when they're having their garage sales for cards, write 10 or 12 of them when you're in the mood to write, and then set them back and send them out, once a month, once a week, not maybe as often as you would otherwise, so that you can portion out not just the money you're spending, but the contact that you're making. I think what's more important in these relationships that you're trying to maintain in the outside world is consistency and how to get them maintained. I know it meant a lot to my sons to be on the other end of the phone when I would call them once a week and be there. And my younger son is not very talkative. And when I would call him on these calls, he was quite talkative. He was really nice.
So, Cheryl, I know that this is a tough subject to talk about, and 5 years down the line, it's still as though it was yesterday. So that just goes to show that going to prison is a traumatic experience for the person that's going through it. You are being affected in so many different ways. All of your relationships are being affected. Is there something that you would change with the information you know now about your time in prison and the way you communicated and the frequency?
I think just understanding the system better. But I think it's important for you to know that if you had a hard relationship going in, you're probably not going to be able to make that a whole lot better while you're in. If you had a good relationship going in, you're not going to ruin it unless you're in there for a really, really, really long time. I mean, I saw superficial relationships where people would go in and they thought they were going to be good for 7 years and they weren't good for 90 days, but they didn't have that strong a relationship, for a long lasting one. I was fortunate at my time of life that I had grown children and had been married for a long time. And, we survived it. And that's part of the whole thing. I think having all this communication is a great way to survive it. Again, how lucky was I that I could afford to use all the resources available to me? And I used up every one of them every month. Think of the people who don't have those resources on the outside or the inside. So I have a prison system that keeps telling me they do everything to make it family friendly. I need them to think about how to make it family friendly.
Thank you for listening to How to Go to Camp with Katrina McLaren and Cheryl Womack. For more support, check out the Women of Worth website, www.womenofworth.wow.org, where you'll find helpful resources, including Cheryl's books, Mummy Loves You Everywhere and How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison. Whether you're preparing for the journey or supporting someone through it, remember there's guidance, hope and a community ready to help you navigate this path.